This episode I'm super excited about because I get to have you two here with me today as friends of mine. And so I'm super excited to just hear your story, Andrea, from this perspective, because I feel like I know both of you guys well, but I feel like I've never sat down with you guys and asked you some of these questions. So it's fun to interview your friends because it's like, I don't interview my friends when we go to dinner, you know? So thank you, both of you guys, for being here and taking your time and just really pouring into the listeners to be able to inspire them with your story and who you are. And I already know that will be the case because of the way the two of you guys are. So thanks for being here. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
We will hop into a formal introduction so that anyone who doesn't know who you are can really get to know what you're doing and the vibe that you guys have going on. So Kevin Mehner started in door-to-door selling pest control with Aptive in college. This led to leading teams and working his way up to being a partner at Aptive currently. He has produced over $250 million in downline revenue over the past decade, working with thousands of sales reps and helping them achieve financial freedom. Aptive has been a springboard for him to invest into multifamily value-add properties in Oklahoma, where he owns 350 doors or $300 million in real estate. His main passion is helping others live the life they want while pushing through limiting beliefs and accessing more power and peace than ever thought possible. Andrea is a talented photographer, yes she is, integrative health practitioner, and newly certified birth doula. She's on a mission to empower women through the transformative journeys of birth, health, and wellness. Kevin and Andrea have 4 beautiful children and are passionate about intentionally creating the life that they desire. I feel like that's such a good introduction to you guys because you both have such amazing things going on in your life. And I've seen the work over the years. I've known you for the past however many years, and I've seen that work that you've put in each individually and as a couple. But tell everyone just a little bit about you, like things you like to do or where you're from or anything like that. So Kevin, do you want to start? And then
Yeah. By the way, you said 300 million real estate, which will be there soon. But
oh, did I say 30 million?
But hey, I'll take it.
Hey, I'm manifesting it for you. 300 million.
No, it's already there.
I'm so sorry.
It's there, but I just want to make sure that people are like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So sorry.
I grew up in Oklahoma. That's where my real estate is. Just kind of, I just grew up a very, kind of insecure, like, kid that had a chip on his shoulder and grew up with a family that wasn't super ambitious necessarily. So some people kind of follow what they were like in, and some people are like, I want to do the opposite of that. So I've always kind of had that like ambition from that. I love some of my hobbies. I love golf. I love any types of sports. I love working with people. I'm very curious. So I just love like understanding how people tick and just getting to know them.
Learn.
Yeah. Learning. And
yes.
Yeah. I realized over the last probably year or so, I'm a big philosopher. So I just love, I'm insatiable about like talking about, big things and, understanding both sides of an opinion and understanding not even just both sides. There's so many different opinions on so many things. And so, not being I used to be super like dogmatic in the way that I thought, just like black and white. And I just love stepping into the gray and trying to understand how people think. So
I love that.
That's probably like honestly my biggest hobby is just talking to people and
I love that.
Getting to know
different perspectives.
What they think.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So cool.
Okay, yeah, he helped activate that in me.
Yeah, so I love that.
It's been fun. It's been a journey. So I mostly grew up in Seattle. I say mostly. I was from 11 and up. And let's see what else. With photography, it started out when I was a senior in high school. I had to figure out like some project to do. And I was stressing. I was like, I don't know. I don't have any talents. Like, what do I do? So a friend of mine would come up from Arizona and we would take pictures together. and like model for each other. And I realized I actually liked being behind the camera instead of in front. And she loved being in front. So it was just perfect.
It was a good duo.
So yeah, and that's what sparked my like interest in photography. So I've been doing that since my senior year of high school. So it's been like, oh man.
Doing the math.
I'm like, what's the year?
2010.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
So, yeah. And then it has ebbed and flowed when we got married, I went into doing wedding photography. And then as we had children, I was like, I love doing families. And so that has just really ebbed and flowed. And it's something that I pick up when I want to do it. And when I don't, there's no pressure. So it's been nice. And then I also recently did last year certification for an integrative health practitioner. So working one-on-one health coaching women. I specifically want to work with women. And because of my experience with doing a natural birth with our 4th child, that's what propelled me to want to be a birth doula. So just I have so many passions and interests now. It's interesting because if I think back on when I was a child and thinking like, I have no talents, what do I do? The only thing I could think of was I'm good at being a friend. And I realized like that truly is how I like go into everything I do, is just seeing everybody as a friend and meeting them where they're at. So
one thing that she like kind of like spurred a thought as she was talking as well is kind of, it might have been like unconscious for a while, but certainly like it's been conscious over the last 4 years, or certainly over the last couple of years, is just in our relationship with the things that we do, always being in choice and respecting like each other in that.
Yeah.
And just, we never want to do anything where we feel like we're like twisting our arm to do it, or feeling like, oh, we have to. So we've kind of really gotten rid of like a lot of the shoulds or the musts or the have tos in our lives, and just like really focused on what are the things that like completely light us up, and either farming out or figuring out a way not to do the things that like drain our energy. And so I think that's like, as she was talking, something that has been probably one of the most conscious, like intentional things that we've done together is over the last little bit, is just making sure that each of us are in choice in the ways that we're showing up for each other and in our lives. So
I love that. Well, and then it gives you like the power and momentum and even motivation to move forward, because you're in an energetic level of like, I want to do this. I'm choosing to do this. I'm excited about this, instead of like a shame or guilt thing of I have to do this. So I love that. I see that in you guys a lot. I think one of the things that I love about you guys most is your relationship with each other. I think you're both amazing parents, and I love seeing that side of it as well. But I think what also makes you amazing parents is that you're so complementary to each other as a couple, and that's a huge priority. And so it's really cool to just see how that carries out into your life in so many different ways, and your different interests and the direction that you go in your life. One thing that I also love about you guys, and I wanted to specifically ask you about, is I think you really have like the good yin and the yang, yin and the yang, whatever you want to say, of the feminine and the masculine. I see that in you guys a lot. And I know, Andrea, you're really big on finding even the masculine and feminine within yourself. How has that looked in your relationship? Because I think that's, again, something I look up to you both so much for.
Yeah, thanks. Honestly, it takes work.
Yes.
Dang we've been married. I know. It doesn't naturally, I mean, it has ebbed and flowed, and I feel like, so we've been married 12 years. He was a bit more in his, like, there's the two different, there's the more divine masculine, and then there's, like, I call it like the wounded or unbalanced masculine, and then there's the feminine as well. And through our relationship, we've really had to work through, like, both of our imbalances. And then step into how can we balance each other out? It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be new. Like, we both were not very super tapped into like our emotions. So we were probably attracted to each other in that way, because it was like so chill.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know that we had like, anything over like a 2 out of 10 like argument until like 7 years in our relationship. But it's like, there's pros and cons. It's like you know, most people wouldn't have observed of like, oh, you guys are like this really passionate couple. You know, most people wouldn't have like been like, oh yeah, these guys are like the pinnacle of like passion or whatever.
Yeah.
But there was also just like, it was just like kind of like this mutual respect and, you know, not a ton of like stuff that
friction
like a lot
points
of,
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to do with our personalities too. But also stepping into different versions of ourselves. So as I learned how to be more in my feminine and allow like the emotions to flow, and that was scary for me.
Yes.
Of like him even seeing me like be bawling, right? It was something that even growing up, I just would
kind
hold
of
it
push
in.
down.
I'd push it down. And so me stepping into that, and then him willing to like step into how do I hold space for her and not feel like I have to fix it, or, you know, so it was a lot of that, like the flow of like, holding space for each other and knowing how to do that in a safe way to not like, for him it was, and you can speak for yourself, but from my perspective, it was learning that it's okay. You don't have to solve my problem. It's just literally just hold me till I'm done crying.
Yes.
Like that's all I need.
Yes.
And then we can like go into the solving.
Yeah. And I think there's like a new, I actually believe that there's a new economy coming, and it's around at least on the men's side, it's just realizing that like well-roundedness in that masculine and feminine is really where I just think that's where the puck is going. Like that's where like,
I love that.
that's like the new economy that you need to bring forth, is like a business or whatever you're creating.
Yes.
To be able to like have space, hold space for all of it.
Yeah.
And realizing that, you know, when someone's having emotions, it's just like an invitation to listen and to be curious and to allow that safety. And I just feel like there's so many beautiful things that can happen in that place.
Totally.
And not just being so reactive. And also, kind of like we said before the podcast a little bit, of realizing that reactivity that you have, like why I think a lot of men sometimes, and myself included, sometimes when emotions come up, it's kind of like, oh, like get over it, whatever, right? But it's like, it's just realizing that that's real for the person, and when you can just like hold that and let it be,
and that's even a superpower
exactly.
too. Like it's
not a weakness. It's like it's
Yeah.
actually an incredible superpower, and I think the more as men we can develop that, like, and bring in more of that,
yes,
then I think women will feel much more safer
totally.
in society to do all the things that they want to do and be empowered to do what they want to do, as they should be. And men can just be a lot more well-rounded in the way that they're just approaching life and less reactive to the things around them. You know?
Totally. And I think women too, like, I think if we're both polarized, it doesn't work. But if we can just come in a little bit, but still stand in our strengths and learn from each other and use each other as like the God-given gifts and talents that we have, it's really cool, because I think that's where the magic happens, instead of trying to be all the exact same too. You know?
And I think there's moments for like polarity to come in, like, you know, if you can hold space for each other, then those moments of polarity where, you know, there's a lot of time where that can come in as far as like, you know, passion, you know, maybe in the bedroom a little bit, whatever.
Yes.
But it's just like that's more likely to happen when you can create some, in my opinion, like space for each person to be able to have it, experience
And
everything.
thrive.
I guess.
Yeah. I'm reading this book called Magnetic Femininity. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it. But one of the things that I loved in it specifically is she was talking about, let's say you're making cookies, right? And you have the bowl. I'm saying this because it's hard for me, because I live in my masculine really strong, like it, and it's carried me, and it's been great for like the success of my business and life and all the things. But I'm trying to figure out the feminine side within myself. And so this resonated with me, because she said, pretend you're making cookies, you have this bowl, and you have like your dominant hand. For me, I'm right-handed. You're like stirring with it. That's like the dominant masculine hand, right? but then your left hand is holding the bowl, so that like it's working together. And if you didn't have the feminine and you're like going all over the place, or you didn't have the masculine and you're holding just the bowl and you're not stirring, like you need both. And I felt like that was so cool, because I think of like the tension and like the flow that has to happen for those two things to occur at the same time. And so I'd love to know with you guys, with that analogy, like how have you seen in your roles as the empire that you're building together have been kind of some of those things, like maybe a more dominant and supportive role and a masculine and feminine role? What has that looked like in your careers, both being at home and being out in Aptive and real estate and all of the things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like you said, I think we kind of do what we're comfortable with initially. So I feel like for the first, probably decade of my career, I was operating a lot in that more like wounded masculine, like very like, I got a chip on my shoulder, I want to prove everybody wrong. And it was just like this. And that also tended to lead to like micromanaging, or like if something was out of my control, like I just have to control it all. So I think that's not like what I would call like a divine masculine thing. It's more like hey, like this is a wounded masculine, and it serves me. It's like, because I feel really safe in it, and it makes me want to control everything, and it leads to more anxiety and stuff, which like, when you're in that moment, it feels like, hey, if I don't have this anxiety, or if I'm not controlling this thing, that it's not going to end up in the way that I want. But it's like over time, having that trust fall to realize, wait, like anxiety isn't really actually helping me do. I mean, it can provide awareness for what I have like, fear over and stuff. But like just trusting more and just allowing people to be in choice, and like allowing myself to be in choice. And so over time, like I've kind of developed this belief system where, if you look at life, there's very few like things that are objectively true. It's more about like, what is our perception on that thing? And is that perception that I have about that thing like actually serving me? So if I have like a belief system about something, but I'm having a lot of emotions around it, or I'm like kind of bumping into things that like don't seem to be counter to whatever I'm trying to go for, then I have an opportunity to change that belief system. So kind of how I frame it is like, if I have this like intention, like this is who I'm trying to become, right? I want to be this person, I want to achieve this thing, whatever. Then we start living after that intention is like out there, and the emotions that come up after that intention is made are almost like lighthouses that are pointing light at belief systems that I can either double down on because they are aligned with my initial alignment, or it's an opportunity to say, is this belief system like actually going to help me achieve what this intention is that I have?
Yes.
And so I think like, to answer your question in a roundabout way, I felt like I was using a hammer for like, it was one hammer that I was using for everything in life. But then I've realized that it's like opening up to more of the subtleties of like, okay, can I open myself? Is this belief system serving me or not? So it's just been more like a holistic approach since then, of just realizing that I have the ability to change my belief system if it's not serving me. There's nothing that's like objectively true about my experience other than what I want to experience, basically. Totally. So that's kind of, I think, been the shift on my side of things. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I love that.
Like I get into like tangents things, but
too, reflecting back on like, we got married, and then for 2 summers we would leave for the summer and go live somewhere else so we can knock doors. And I grew up where my dad, like most people, it was like the 9-to-5 job, right?
Totally.
So for me, marrying someone who wasn't the 9-to-5 job, it was like, I struggled because I didn't know like, well, when are you off or not, with work? Like we struggled a lot with like trying to figure out our groove
of that.
Yeah. Like this is not the life that I grew up living with my dad going 9-to-5 job. So we kind of like, I struggled a little bit of like having this perception of like, well, it needs to be this way, when the reality was it will never be that way. So we had to kind of process through that through years, honestly, of having, moving and living somewhere else and then bringing kids into that. And if he would go knock doors, like being a single mom pretty much, like that was really hard. So we had to really figure out our groove. And I had to change my perception of like, it's never going to be the 9 to 5. Like totally. This is a totally different way of living. Mm-hmm. And I need to like change how we can like work together in that flow, because it's a different structure than what I was raised on.
Totally.
And same with him. Like he was also raised father 9 to 5 job. So, and we didn't know a ton of people that had that more entrepreneurial lifestyle. So like within our family, it wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. So it was like very new and different. So yeah, we had to figure that out, and there's some rough patches and especially bringing kids in. And,
I think there's like, it's hard because, I kind of, on one hand, there's something that brought me to this point, and on the other hand, I'm in this place and I see a different way. So it's like, I kind of balance that with my recruits or the people that I meet with now of like, like a lot of scarcity got me to where I am, or a certain belief system got me here. But I'm trying to like usher in a different, it's like when people become rich and they're like, it's not about the money. And it's like, well, yeah, but you got the money. Yeah. So it's like, what do you...
Now you can say
it's like, yeah, that's convenient
now.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like there's like that interesting thing where, I grinded a ton for a long time. And it's not that there's not the grind now, but it's just more of like it's kind of more of it's just a flowy place. Mm-hmm. But I had to have like, I almost think of it like an ocean and like a river. And if someone's in an ocean and they have zero, like nothing to push off of,
no structure,
then it can feel kind of like lost. And so sometimes there's periods of life where you like, hey, we're going to like establish these really, like we're going to have like a stream, and it's going to be like really narrow, but at least like there's some type of structure we can kind of start working around. And then you might be in that period for a while, and then eventually you create like, a river, and then it's like the Amazon River, and then it's like even wider and wider and wider. And I think for me, I want to try to like go back to an ocean, but it's like in a place where You've learned everything. I've overcome all these barriers that I've like put on myself.
Yes.
To then feel just like completely in choice and super flowy.
Totally.
So it's like, I don't know. It depends on where people are in their journey, but I think all of it's good. Like it's all good. It just depends on what like period of life you're in.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to go back on my life and be like, oh, I was so like rigid and structured in where I was, and it got me where we are. But also just, it's interesting.
It's like once you grow and know more, you have the responsibility to act accordingly with those things that you've learned. And then it's almost like then you can handle the ocean, where if you just went right into the ocean to begin with, it wouldn't really. Yeah, I like that analogy. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and something that the rigidity, right? It took a lot of sacrifice. And so, and he's always been more of the visionary, like seeing the big picture, and I get lost in like, oh my gosh, like the day to day. So like there was one summer, it was 2 months after we had our third son. He was like, we're going to go out and sell. He was going to knock doors again, which he hadn't done for a couple years. And I was like, okay, I trust, with like 2 young crazy toddler boys and then a baby, a newborn. It was a really rough summer. We moved to Portland for the summer, and honestly, I feel like we were just ships passing in the night. Like we hardly really were connected at all, and I was really struggling mentally as well. And but it's what got us to where we are. So I have a lot of gratitude for it. As hard as it was, he always held the vision of it. And I have a lot of gratitude for that, because we wouldn't be in the home that we are or in the financial stability that we are. So I'm really thankful for it.
I love that. Thank you for your vulnerability in that, because I think oftentimes people look at successful couples and just go, oh, that, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, to just like land in this, And so I think like sharing like your heart in those struggles that like every human can relate to. And that's part of the story and the journey. And so I appreciate that, because I think that's a real thing. And there's those hard, long days. And I can't even imagine what summer sales would be like I've never done that personally, but for either of you, like the long, hard knocking, day-to-day grind, and then at home trying to be the support and the, running a family and a household and feeling really lonely. You guys both probably felt really lonely in that, but you had the vision and you're like, this isn't going to be forever. We're going to make it through. So I'd love to kind of focus on that for a minute. Like, what sacrifices have you made, Andrea? And I would love to know, Kevin, what you feel from Andrea's perspective, because we want to know her side of this story. Like, what sacrifices do you feel like you have made to create the life that you have now?
Yeah, I think the biggest is single parenting for a lot of times.
Yes.
Somehow it always ended up where I'd have a kid and then he'd have to go travel for like a month, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like just motherhood in general is really hard. But then like adding on top of him having to travel a ton and just feeling so overwhelmed. And we had 4 kids within 6 years. Like it was a lot.
You guys are amazing.
The first 3 were planned. Our last wasn't. But I think it was just exactly what we needed. And that's how we got our girl finally. We have 3 boys and a girl. And she's just wonderful. So, yeah, I just think like for me, the sacrifice was a lot of being in my own trenches of motherhood. And figuring out, I mean, as we like grew together and him realizing like, oh, like I really need to help. Like he's really good at, if I tell him what I need, then he steps in and fills that need. So luckily this summer that was super hard. We did have his youngest sister come live with us for a little bit, and that was incredibly helpful. It's also different when it's not your own husband and their own kids, you know?
Totally.
So there was still a lot of loneliness, still a lot of, honestly, I'm sure I had some postpartum, like,
oh, yes,
depression. I don't know. Like, I was in such a deep hole. But I mean, I look at it now and I have a lot of gratitude for that version of me, because it is literally how it got me to who I am today. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like that is like a lot of it is just that more like wounded feminine trying to be a mom and try to keep that together while also figuring myself out. I feel like I was just kind of lost for a little bit there.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know
month after month, that's hard. Yeah.
And I think at the time, like, to be fair, like I wasn't really equipped I did the best that I could on the emotional side of things. But that's kind of that summer was kind of a perfect example of, I'd already been, I had done 4 summers. I was honestly off the doors for 4 years at that point. I didn't think I'd ever knock again. But it was almost just like that place of, okay, time to create the like stream again, like time to like really like ratchet it down, because I could see the future of like, okay, like we need to produce more leaders, or we need to do this and that. And I think like one thing that Andrea has been incredible at is, obviously if she can sense like that I'm not like 100% aligned with what I'm saying, like she'll call out the bullshit a little bit.
I love that.
But like when she feels like that masculine, like that divine masculine of like, hey, like this is what we're called to do. This is what I'm called to do. Then I feel like she's really good at like kind of
getting on
grounding
board
into that.
Oh, I love that.
But at the same time, like I want to honor the same thing in her. So it's not about like the man being like, oh, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's like in both sides, like one of my, again, big core values is like authenticity to what I feel. And I want to be respected in that. And vice versa. But I think going back to what we said at the beginning, is just like giving each other the space for that. So she's been good about, even though there's been some like big emotions at times where I've felt like, hey, like this is what I need to do, like 100%. There's been a way of like working together to kind of figure it out, regardless of how hard it is. But if we look back on those moments, again, on the things that have been like actually aligned, like really like at the deepest parts of us, we can look back and say like, well, those are such big pivot points for our lives. And I've just been really grateful for her in trusting that.
Totally.
And also, like, again, trusting her on all the things that because it's not, again, I want to make it clear that it's not like one. I think the masculine, whoever's like really operating more in that masculine in that moment, I think it's like, that's like that structure, like trying to build the kingdom or whatever you want to call it. It's like an opportunity for the couple to be like, okay, like, can we ground into this? Can we align into this? And I think a lot of times I've observed from coaching or from just other relationships that I've observed is I feel like some couples are like stuck in this like no man's land where it's almost like, whether it's the man or the woman, whoever's taken on that masculine role, it's almost like there's this like an inability to like really own it and just really like, hey, like this is what I feel really called to.
Yes.
And because there's like that fear of like really stepping into that, there's like this like no man's land, this limbo. So I just see a lot of imbalances in relationships where it's just like, whether it's the man or the woman, they're not fully stepping into their power because there's like this like fear of like really like owning it.
Yes.
And so I just think like that's what we've done very well, and we're not perfect, but just trusting each other in that role, I guess.
I see that in you guys for sure. I have a really good example of how Shane and I haven't done that. We just figured this out. We just barely did roles and responsibilities. Again, we've done this in the past, and I do it. Every time I coach a business owner on this, I'm like, especially if they have a team, it's like writing out every single role and responsibility you can think of and what that looks like. So Shane and I just did that within our home because we felt exactly what you were talking about, where it was like we both, anytime we fight, it's like the opposite of fighting. We're like, oh no, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. Like, and it's so annoying because he's doing that to me and I'm doing that to him. And so we're like, okay, we are in the no man's land. So we went through every single role and responsibility we could think of, down to like taking out the trash in our home, right? And both of us do not like doing laundry. And we know the other person doesn't like doing laundry. So we kept being like, no, I'll do it. No, I promise I'll do it. Whatever. And finally we were just like, Andrea, in our home, Andrea is going to do the laundry. And it's so crazy how once taking ownership of that, like it went so smooth. So now the last couple of months we leaned into that and we saw that like, okay, on Mondays and Thursdays, Andrea does the laundry, and then it like works because she took ownership. I took ownership of that, right? And so we're like, okay, we're going to do this with everything. So we wrote down everything, and now it's finally like, okay, Shane's in charge of this. I'm in charge of this. Shane's in charge of this. I'm in charge of this. And it's very equal in that finally we have our own roles, and like who's in charge of that. And then I can just focus on my stuff and he can focus on his, instead of I'm always trying to make sure he's not doing too much, or he's trying to make sure I relax, or whatever, all these things. And so I love that you said that, because the no man's land is like a real thing. And then you're not like thriving in each of your roles. And laundry is a stupid example, but I think it really does display. Yeah, everyone has to do
that. Can I double click on that? Actually?
Yeah, I love that.
We kind of had like this. So we were in Italy and Greece a few months ago, and we were having this conversation around our kids' schooling, for example. And it's kind of been, we've had this, I mean, we're really big on intentionality and feeling aligned in everything we do. Because we feel like if you can experience the 10 out of 10, that thing, it just feels like, it's like you just have so much energy.
Yes.
Like first class.
You like beam out of it.
You just feel infinite. Yeah. And so we were talking about our kids' school, and for a lot of time, the conversation was about what are we losing? Are we losing time? Are we losing, she didn't want to have the kids at home for homeschooling because which makes sense because, if you're in mom mode for a long time and they're finally getting to school, it's like, okay, I want to have my time, which totally makes sense. And so optimizing for basically like the highest version of what life could be for us. And so there was this, for a few years, there was a disconnect with kids' school, and alignment wise, like we'd be fine taking our kids to 4 different schools based on what, like making sure they're in the right school. But we were also thinking of it in terms of how do we solve that, right? Do we have to, we don't want to drive them. We don't want to do that. But then we started thinking about it like, hey, our minds are starting to get overly hyperactive here. Like, what's the intention here? Like, what's the 10 out of 10?
Yeah, what's the best case scenario?
What's the perfectly aligned thing? And then saying like, how can I invest into that? So rather than saying like, what am I losing? What am I gaining? I'm gaining this really high intention thing. And then how do you solve it? Doesn't have to be us. Like we could get a driver, we could get a house manager. So like when you were bringing up those things, it's almost like it's more just like grounding in what's the most abundant version of our lives we can have. And can we solve this in ways outside of us?
Totally.
Because if that's going to create more scarcity or more like of those feelings, like we don't want to have those like low vibration or just like those feelings that are like energy draining.
Yes, totally.
We want to try to invest in all of the energy giving things. And so I think sometimes we think about stuff in terms of I have to do it or she has to do it. And sometimes there's like a third door that doesn't involve either of us, and people can show up in a way that's better, right?
Totally.
It's like people that have fear about like having a nanny sometimes. And it's like, well, if they're going to get more attention and it's like it's going to be like a higher quality. It's going to be a better experience for them. Like, why am I clinging on to this thing about I don't want anybody to watch my kids other than me? It's like, well, that belief system is causing more harm than good because your kids aren't getting the attention that, it's just like solving it in that way. Like what's the best outcome and optimizing for the best outcome rather than like justifying or rationalizing all the mind things as to why it can't work or whatever.
Totally.
But then also being open and knowing it'll challenge your belief system.
Totally.
So I had to go through like, ideally I'd love to homeschool my kids, but is that the best version of me?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
No, it is not the best version of me.
Exactly.
I am an exhausted mom. Like I would love to give them that, and that's not the best version of me. So that's where we had to get more creative, and I had to go through my own belief system of like, well, why do I feel like I have to be, the mom that does it all, right? And just I think culturally it's there that like the women have to take on a lot of roles. Say like cleaning the house. Like I grew up where my mom is a professional organizer, like she's very clean, and I had to go through, I had this belief that like, oh my gosh, I have to have my house be perfectly clean. Like I was raised, I have to have a chore list, all these things. And I tried it and it did not last long. And I was like, that's not me. That's not my flow. I honor that and how I was raised, but I've realized like that's not how I operate. So we had to kind of go through that of like, okay, what's the best case scenario? I'm like, especially in the house size we live in, I can hardly keep up on all the daily tasks. So then we're like, okay, let's get a cleaner, come every 2 weeks, and like let's prioritize that in our budget and all of that. And it has taken such a weight off of my shoulders so I can show up better as a mom.
Totally.
And not be exhausted and being stressed all the time about cleaning my house, right? Because the laundry is always there. The house will always be messy.
Yes.
And releasing that belief of like, it has to be 100% of the time clean is so impractical with kids.
Yes.
And then I can give myself grace to know like, you know what? Like we've really surrendered to a lot of flow within our home of like, sometimes like we have these expectations that we should, like a chore chart, for example. Like our kids need to be this every day and do this. Some days I don't even want to do that. So how can I like give grace to them? I'm like, so something that we really tried to embrace is instead of a chore chart, having our kids like look around the house, look like what's something you can help pick up around the house.
I love
Some
that.
days they'll go do their rooms in the playroom, and I'm like, wow, thank you so much.
That was more than I would have.
Yeah,
even
some
asked
days
you
it's like
to.
a sock
Yeah.
on the floor, and I'm like, okay, really?
Great effort.
But it's like that's what they can give that day. And so for us, we have really surrendered to the flow of that, because sometimes we'll get in the groove of like, if one person's like, I'm ready, let's clean the house.
Yes.
And then it creates contention because not everyone else is on the same page. And for years, I feel like we just kept this contention. Like we all had expectations. And the moment we sat down, we're like, wow, if we just took off expectations and surrendered to like, some days he'll do a lot more cleaning than I do. And some days I do a lot more cleaning than him. And that's okay as long as eventually it gets cleaned.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
The cleaning's always there.
Like you all have the main goal or same purpose.
Like we want to live in a clean home. And so
Yes.
that's what we try to teach our kids is like the awareness. Let's
Totally.
look around the house. Like we're all part of this home. And there's always opportunity for us to teach them even more. So that's like something that I'm like, okay, they're getting a little older. They can get a little bit more responsible, right?
And I also want to be respectful for like listeners that might feel like, oh, that's great. Like you can get cleaners or it's like,
Yes.
you can do that thing. But I think so much in life is counterintuitive. It's like literally the opposite of how we think it works is the way it works. And I just feel like with abundance, as much as maybe someone doesn't feel like they can do all these things to like outsource or whatever, but it's just starting with just even little things. That's where I feel like so much of our abundance has come in our life is getting rid of the story of whatever it is. Like I'm showing up in this in a way I don't want to, right? Like I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have to.
Yes.
So if you can change those from like a must or a should
Yes.
to like, how can I get creative to not have to do this? It opens up more space for you to show up in choice and in an abundant place.
Yes.
And when you're in that feeling, you're not thinking about all the anxiety of your business or how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? You're in a place of like infinite possibility. And that's where like literally all the abundance comes in because you're not like operating in this place of like, oh, the shoulds and the musts and the have tos and I have to show up in this way even though I don't want to.
Yes.
And it seems so counterintuitive, but it's like releasing that in any small way that you can and you start with that. At some point, you can do that on a massive scale.
Yes.
Because you're like, oh, I'm not like twisting my arm at every single juncture. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So,
Yeah, and knowing that for some people, what you don't like is actually their gift.
Yes.
Right? And so, like,
would
our
love-
brother-in-law has a cleaning business, and we're like, sweet, we'd love to support you, and you're helping us, and it's a mutual thing, you know?
It's win-win.
Yeah, and so like I think in like Kevin said, in little ways, like find those things. Like who is someone that actually really does love to do that?
Totally.
I'm sure there's someone out there who loves to do laundry.
Yes. Yes.
Or like whatever it is, and realizing that when you release that, you're also allowing other people to step in and be in their genius too.
Totally. I think what I'm hearing you say is like, it's not can I or can't I, it's how can I? Like, because if you just decide ahead of time, can I do this or can't I do this? It's like yes or no, and then you're done. Mm-hmm. And that's like the black and white dogmatic thinking. But then when you can open it up to be like, how can I? Then all of a sudden your brain turns on, and we're really creative beings, right?
Yeah.
Which is so cool to be able to like search and think like, hey, can I trade with someone?
Yes.
Or can I, like, what can I do here? And I think that's almost like what is so like empowering and exciting about life is like, how can I do this? Like, oh my gosh, like all these ideas come and then you live in the flow more of what you're talking about.
yeah, the how signals the land of infinite opportunity.
Yes.
And the yes or no, 1-0 binary.
Yes.
Like, again, sometimes like if there's an earthquake going on, I have to get my family out of the house. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be very like survival 1-0.
Yes.
But I think so much of our lives,
General
we're
daily
literally
life,
just like that switch is always on. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we don't have to have that switch on all the time.
Yes.
For survival mechanisms, for sure.
Totally.
But outside of that, ask how.
Totally.
And even if like right now you might not be able to solve that equation, at least asking how like opens up way more possibility for you. So
Totally.
yeah, I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's where with school with our kids, I I was that switch. Yes, no. Like I didn't think that there were other options besides like, I don't want to homeschool. Already tried that.
And that's Kevin, my only option. Now what?
Yeah, like there's nothing around where we live that is what we want. But we knew that there was something that we knew of even before we moved to where we are. And I had to like let down my guard and be like, okay, let's just look at all the options and then like, let's get creative. And that's what led us to now we're moving a custom home that we built and we absolutely love the area, right. But like dreams, I think also dreams can shift and priorities and alignment shift. Mm-hmm. And where we are now was a dream and we've been living the dream and it's been beautiful. And we've had moments where like, okay, like let's dream another dream, and like let's align that dream with what our core values are. And for us currently, right now is like our kids, their schooling, like we really want to make sure they're in the best possible place for them to get creative and dream.
And to illustrate the point of what I was saying too, it's like following our North Star, our intuition. It's like now we're going from a place where we have a pretty decent sized mortgage where it's like, we paid cash for the house because of the equity that was built. And then we paid cash for the construction to renovate the home. And there's leftover to go maybe get a place in St. George or whatever. It's like, it creates, following that flow creates more and more abundance, right?
It's like, it's just
mind-blowing
when
that happens.
It is magic.
It's like, okay, I thought it was this, but now it's this. And you just honoring whatever it is currently in your life. And it just opens up way different doors that are incredible.
And so it doesn't always make logical sense. It's like, I think the full alignment is like your mind and your intellect and then your heart and your gut. And I think they all play different roles. And when you can be in line with all of those, that's when it's like poof, like magic. It all. Yeah, exactly. Totally. Like it's kind of cool to see that happen. And it doesn't make sense sometimes, and that's what's so cool about it. You're like, what? How did all of this happen? But just being in the flow of that is really cool. Yeah. Okay, kind of wrapping up I just want to ask you guys 2 more questions. I want to know like what's next for you guys? What are you each excited about within your own things or things together? I know you kind of talked about this new move for you guys in school and, growing a new community, specifically where you live. That's super awesome and exciting. I'm really sad because you're my neighbor right now. I'm going to be sad that you're not right up the street, but so excited for you guys. But what about each of you individually? What are you excited about next?
So I've really loved coaching. So I started picking up a few clients just the one-on-one, talking a lot about alignment. I mean, I don't know if your listeners can pick up on this conversation that we've been having, but it's very what I would call like big picture, like spirit focused, I don't know, not as much. Certainly there's like tactical things, but it's more like the philosophy of it and getting aligned.
Yes.
So I'm really I've just realized that that's my gift and that's what I love to do is like really focusing on big picture ideas and helping people like ground and aligned in that for themselves. Cause it's very unique to every single person.
Totally.
So that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. I love what I'm doing. I feel very aligned in the stuff I'm already doing, but just bringing in that is kind of what focused over the next year.
And then like the ripple effect of like you're helping one person at a time and then they're going out and making an influence in all of their circles. I love that.
And I think we'll probably do some of that as a couple too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I didn't know about that. Cool.
In the future, I really feel like, and we've already had some friends come in where we can see, and we're not perfect in any way, but like seeing the imbalances of that masculine, feminine energy. And as we've held space for them and talked through things and like let's look at the big picture, let's get creative. It's been cool to see how those little things are like opening their eyes to how they can rebalance in their own relationships and within themselves. So
and we just happen to have a puzzle piece that they maybe are missing and they have a puzzle piece that we're missing. And it's not about like hierarchy or one teaching the other. It's just like we've just realized that everything is very symbiotic and it's a co-creation experience where we're picking up on some things that we're observing and it's like, wow, like we really admire that in you.
Yes.
And just that like exchange, it's like an infinity sign where if you are giving and you're just providing from that heart place, like even if there's not like some like really specific exchange of value from the other side, even just letting letting you show up in your gift is such a value add.
Totally.
Because you're letting me experience and give from my heart. And a lot of people aren't open to like receiving. Mm-hmm. And sorry, anyway, I didn't mean to hijack it, but.
No, I love that.
I think it's with that, cool. It's being a witness to, because I think ultimately we're not here to change other people. We're here to just do us and change us. And then that has a ripple effect.
Totally.
And so for me, I think because I was in a lot of motherhood deep years, finally now all 4 kids, we found a school that they all can go every day and like amazing. They're thriving and loving it. And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, the world's my oyster. Like I can have all this time now, which is incredible. Yes. So right now I've been in this like creative flow of like, I want to get this certification and like following all of my passions.
So cool.
And I know that eventually I will create like a course around alignment for women. And so I know like right now, this is my journey and this is what I will then be like helping other women through this journey of alignment, which I think is ultimately everyone's genius is just being within themselves, fully aligned with feminine and masculine and heart and mind and body and spirit. And so all of like my journey is mine, but I can see in a lot of women how like I could help guide. So I am also wanting to really step more into the coaching sphere of just being there to support women, especially, mm-hmm. and maybe eventually we would do it with couples, but yeah, and whatever it is with women, I think a lot of transformation is through birthing children in the world.
Yes.
Because you birth a new version of yourself and you're not the same person going through that transition. And so I really feel like that's why I was very called to like become a birth doula and help support mothers through that. And it truly is a step into really finding more parts of yourself. So anyways, wherever it leads me, I'm just really in the flow of things. I really also love to gather women together in groups and community.
You're amazing at that.
Women need community. I mean, men also do, but women, it's like in our DNA. Like we need that community and safe place for women to gather and just be witness to each other and our growth. So I love what you're doing, Andrea. I think it's incredible and it's very needed right now in the world.
Thank you. Well, and you've served my community, like when you came and spoke at, virtually to my community. I was just so blown away by the way that you do practice what you preach, mm-hmm. and now you preach what you've been practicing. And I'm excited to hear you step into that and lean into that more to like share that vision and that perspective of what you've learned, because I think it's so needed. And I think we're all craving that without even knowing mm-hmm. what we're craving, Mm-hmm. And so I love that.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you saw that in me and gave me the opportunity to step into that role. It was actually eye-opening because when you asked me to speak, I'm like, what is she going to ask me to speak on? When you said masculine and feminine, I was like, oh, I guess I have been really working hard on balancing that in my life. That's cool that you noticed that within me. So I think you're
I think you're so good at it. I'm like, I need to learn from Andrea for sure. So I love that. Okay. My last question is, obviously, you guys know that I own the Live Big Collective. So living big is like a really big thing of what we teach and what that looks like. And my belief is it looks different for everyone, So I'd just love to end with our last question just being, what does living big mean for each of you? And either one of you can answer first.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of it is a perception for me. But I feel like it's just complete in choice. And having options, like that's how kind of I view it, is like doing what I want with who I want when I want, and that's like abundance for me. And it's gonna look different ways at different times in our lives, but yeah, just if I want to do a thing, that we have the ability to do that thing, and we have joy in that thing. And so, yeah, I mean that's pretty much how I view it.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like when I think of live big, it's like, what's the most abundant version of you, and how would you live, right? And for me, as just through my life, it has changed. Like you said, it's so different for everybody. Even just down to like priorities or things that you value. I've realized what I value has shifted as I've also evolved. But then stepping fully into what I value in that moment of my life and how can I live big in that way. And then honoring all parts of you that want to live big this way and then live big that way. And it's
different
it's
chapters.
A beautiful thing to shift. Like we should always live big in different versions of ourselves, because
I love that.
If you're not, you're just static and not evolving. And we're here to evolve. And that's the whole experience of being a human.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I love both of those perspectives, because I feel like oftentimes when people say what living big means to them, it's like examples. And I feel like both of yours were like principles, where it can carry you through different chapters and seasons of life of what that looks like. And so I love that. But thank you for your time. Like I think time is the most valuable commodity. So it really means a lot that you guys have spent today with me. And I love your perspectives and insights and all of the things. Is there anything else you want to say or leave? Or
no, thank you for having us.
Yeah. A lot of gratitude.
Thank you guys. Love you both. You're the best.
Thanks.